No, I have not. And on the way in, when I landed, I did a press call with Senator Kerry because he was outraged by the response I got from the Undersecretary, which was politicizing something as important as planning for redeploying our troops. So we are introducing legislation to require the Pentagon to do the planning and to brief the Congress in a public or classified or combination briefing. Because what I started worrying about in early spring, based on my contacts within the military and within the Pentagon itself, was that the Pentagon was under pressure from the White House, particularly the Vice President's office, not to do any planning. That to plan was to admit that they would leave, and they did not want to do that. And I was shocked. I mean, it was just beyond anything I could imagine that you would be so irresponsible and ideologically driven that you would not take the steps necessary to plan for redeploying our troops, which is it's a very dangerous exercise. You know, I've tried to really immerse myself in as much as I can as a member of the Armed Services Committee about military planning and all the contingencies, and withdrawing whatever number at whatever time from Iraq, along with our equipment, which we cannot leave, will expose our troops to tremendous danger as they, you know, drive in these convoys, most likely through the south, out through Kuwait, along those very same roads where they've been attacked and where they've encountered the improvised explosive devices and other bombs. So I wrote a private letter. I mean, I didn't do this, you know, for political purposes. I said, look, I just want to know. I'm hearing these things, Secretary Gates, and I think you should come to the Congress and tell us, you know, what is happening. And I like Secretary Gates. I mean, I've seen some real changes. He comes before the Congress, unlike Secretary Rumsfeld, and he'll say, I don't know, or that's a good idea, or I'll get back to you. So, you know, I have a good personal relationship with him. And then I got this letter. And, you know, Undersecretary Edelman comes from Vice President Cheney's staff. He was, I guess, second in command to Scooter Libby, comes with that whole kind of neocon worldview, and starts impugning my patriotism for asking for a briefing that I'm entitled to as a member of the Senate and as a member of the Armed Services Committee. We have got to plan, because the miscalculations and the misjudgments that led us into Iraq, that have marked our presence there, have been heartbreaking. And at this point, it is imperative that whatever the contingency might be, and our legislation will say, we want to know what you're planning for every contingency. You know, if you think the surge is working, well, then what is your contingency planning for, you know, how long you, quote, hold? Because, you know, the whole idea is, you know, clear and build and hold. Well, how long will you hold, and how many troops will you need to hold? If it's sort of as a middling, you know, outcome, and you're doing well in Al Anbar province, but you're certainly not doing well in Baghdad, well, give us some sense of your contingency planning there. And if it is, as many of us believe it to be, that we're going to start redeploying our troops out of Iraq sooner or later, either under this president or under the next, we want to know that you have taken those dangers to our men and women into account. And it's not only the dangers to Americans, it's the dangers to Iraqis. So I sent a letter to Secretary Gates asking him if he agreed with Secretary Edelman's letter. And then Senator Kerry and I announced our plan for legislation, which, you know, I've read your editorials over time, and you know, the idea that the Congress would be, you know, trying to substitute our collective 535-person judgment, you know, for the White House and the Pentagon is not something that at least that I enter into lightly. But when you confront a situation like this, where they won't even tell you that they're doing what should be expected, I shouldn't even have to ask, it raises serious doubts about whether we're into another version of their parallel reality, that despite what is going on in the ground, despite what we hear every single day, that there is no military solution, they refuse to prepare themselves for what I believe is inevitable. So we'll see what happens going forward.
What
now.
about their argument, though, that you shouldn't convey these things to your adversaries?
You know, the idea that our adversaries have not followed everything that we have said and done since March of 2003 is naive. You know, the internet makes us in instantaneous communication, and one thing we have learned, particularly about Al-Qaeda and some of the related insurgency groups, is they are very sophisticated in the use of media. And that's why I sent a private letter. You know, my view was I just wanted to know. I kept asking people in, you know, both open and closed hearings, and I kept getting the runaround, and then I kept being told, you know, I'd ask a question in a closed hearing, and then some general would follow me out and say, ask that again, you know, they won't do it. You know, so, I mean, I feel like my obligation is to protect America and protect Americans. So, David, I think that this is the same old from them. You know, they don't want to be asked questions that they don't want to answer, and they don't want to answer any questions. So it's just, you know, Rumsfeld used to do that, and the press let him get away with it. You know, we know what we know what we don't know, but we don't know what we don't know. And he'd say these things like some Delphic oracle, and you know, the Pentagon press and the White House press would go, oh, you know, and so for years, I mean, we didn't get answers. And so now maybe there's a pent-up, you know, frustration where, you know, we don't want to be misled again, and we don't want to find ourselves in a situation where, especially when I take office in January 2009 and we're still facing this, and I call my Secretary of Defense and my Joint Chiefs in and I say, what are the plans? And they say, well, you know, Madam President, we could never plan to the extent we wanted to plan. We'll give you what we've got, but it's nowhere near ready enough to operationalize. That's what I think they're doing, if you want me to be blunt about it.